And joining the show now, Ryan Ballantine from the Go Stamps Go Show, a contributor at 3downnation.com. It's become almost tradition to talk Stampeders on 2 and Out at this time of year, so thanks for being here again.
Pleasure as always. Glad to be back.
All right, I do want to start off here. The Stamps are coming off a 6-12 season and a semifinal loss to the BC Lions, but in that 6-12 season, keeping the playoff streak alive in Cowtown. Like, how do they do it, man?
You're welcome.
I mean, it helps that Saskatchewan sucks and Edmonton's a dumpster fire. That really helped. The idea that the Stampeders made the playoffs last year, I think, was something that nobody was surprised by. That they made it at 6-12, I think might have been a surprise.
Yeah.
It is the worst season that they've had under this kind of Huffnagel-Dickinson era since 2008. But they just keep on rolling and can only get better from here.
Now, the strength of the Stampeders is obviously the continuity of almost everything, from head coach to GM to president. Well, now Jay McNeil is a president of the team. John Huffnagel's now sort of in an advisory role, and he's earned that. Let's be clear there. Is there a lot of pressure on these guys? I mean, to have a really good season this year? Or kind of where's the temperature with Stampeder fans regarding them?
Well, it's definitely going to be an interesting kind of spot to be in, because for a long time, Stampeder fans kind of believed that the season started in November. Right. The regular season is great, but it doesn't matter because we know we're getting to the playoffs, and all that matters is what you do in the playoffs. Well, now by the time the playoffs roll around, they'll be nearly 6 years removed from their last playoff win. And that's not good enough. When you look at the last time they won a playoff game was the Grey Cup game.
Wow.
In 2018. And since then they've lost Western Finals, they've lost Western Semifinals, and just haven't been able to get it done. So when you consider that from a Stampeders perspective, I would suggest that, yes, the pressure is on this group to be more successful and to improve. And I think that there's going to need to be at least a playoff victory, if not, and I would consider hosting the West Final to be a victory in that stretch and a step forward in that direction. So I think if the Stamps were to win the West but not get into the Grey Cup, there might be that kind of, okay, we've taken forward steps. But if you miss the playoffs or lose another Western semifinal, I don't know what happens to this group, and I don't know what happens to this coaching staff as it is, because they just haven't been able to get over the hump.
Yeah, Calgary has been like a quarterback factory for years and years and years. So this Jake Maier, he's not really living up to that as of yet. Contract year for him coming up here. He started all the games last year. What do you think his outlook is this year, and what do you think his leash is going to be like?
It's been very interesting for me with Jake, because of course you've had two Jakes. You had the 2023 Jake, who wasn't good, and I don't think he would say he was any good either. Was throwing just mostly checkdowns, keeping it there, keeping it in. And trying to dink and dunk his way down the field, but was also on the run for a good chunk of the season. He was not getting good protection from the tackle spot and was constantly under pressure, and as a result had to get rid of the ball faster. Now flip that back a year when you had Julian Good-Jones and Derek Dennis patrolling the tackle spots, and if you prorate Jake Maier's numbers, he's a top 2 quarterback in the CFL. So if you take his 9 games that he played for the Stampeders, translate that to a full season, he's competitive with Zach Collaros in that season, and no one's questioning Zach Collaros at this point, right? So the question this year for me is, did the Stampeders improve at the tackle position? Did they find someone who's able to give Jake Maier the time that he needs? And let's also not forget that last year you lose Malik Henry after just a couple games. Clark Barnes was showing to be an incredibly versatile Canadian receiver. He went down for half a season. You also lost Jalen Philpott before the year even began last year, and he was supposed to be a big piece of the receiving core. So when you have 3 starting receivers go down and your tackles aren't protecting you, what are you expecting the quarterback to do? That he was able to even drag this team into the playoffs at all in that scenario is to me more of a credit to him. The interceptions were bad at the beginning of the year. They slowed down in the back half. I think he only threw 3 interceptions in the last 9 games, 3 or 4 maybe in the last 9 games. So there were positive steps. Now, whether or not those positive steps can keep going forward, that's going to be the question. And I do think that the Matthew Schultz signing indicates that the Stampeders are telling Jake, you better be good. You know, if we're healthy and we get you help, you need to be the Jake Maier that we cut Bo Levi Mitchell for instead of the Jake Maier that we saw last season.
And they bring in a new quarterback coach, right? That worked with Bo in his university days.
And everybody else. Eastern Washington was a factory for the CFL for a while.
So is that taking pressure off Dave in that part of his duties? Like it seemed like he had a lot on his plate, and we saw Hamilton step back from the double thing with Orlando Steinauer. Is Bo gonna help with being a quarterback coach in that regard?
I wrote it in the off season that I thought Dave Dickinson should give up one of his hats. And I think it's not just because of the work, because I think we've seen GMs and head coaches be able to do the work. I don't think that the work is the issue, and I would never question Dave Dickinson's ability to do both jobs. But where I think that we've lost the track here in this particular scenario is players have changed. When Wally Buono was doing the dual role, guys in the 90s were grateful to be playing football. And now the mindset amongst most modern players is, you should be grateful I signed with you. And so now what you've got is your general manager hat where you're telling a guy, hey, I need you to take less because you're not worth what you think you're worth. And then that same guy, you have to look in the eye on game day and say, I need you to play above your contract because you need to be worth more than you're paid. And how difficult is that to manage anymore? It's not the 90s. It's not the early 2000s. It is very much a different mindset in all employment. And football is no different. People are leaving jobs because they're not happy. And when you don't have the ability and the separation of church and state between GM and head coach, handling that portion of the job has got to be incredibly difficult.
Wow, that is a fascinating way to look at it. We saw towards the end of Wally Buono's career, sort of the same struggles. And hey, he's getting put on that Wall of Fame in Calgary finally, I should say, this summer. I do want to ask about those receivers. Of course, you have the great experience and ability in Reggie Bagleton and Mark and Michelle. And even though he's coming off injury, I'm going to say Malik Henry, he's already shown that he can have these big play abilities there. But between Clark Barnes and Jalen Philpott, and I'm a fan of Trey Odom's Dukes, it seems like there's going to be an odd guy out. But after last year, a lot of criticism was thrown at that receiving group, even if they were young, inexperienced, and kind of thrown to the wolves because of injury. Is there any new names that we haven't talked about, or is it really just keeping these current crop of guys healthy and productive?
Well, I think you are going to see guys coming back from injury from last year. In the red and white game on the weekend, Clark Barnes made the best catch of the session in my mind. He picked one up off his shoelaces in stride and was able to keep running for another couple yards before the simulated tackle was called. Of course, you've still got Reggie Bagleton, who's one of the best in the game. Trey Odom's Dukes, to me, has always been a great kind of injury replacement or a guy that's not the starter, but he's the guy who comes in to spell guys off here and there. He had trouble with drops. He's had trouble with drops his entire career. And so that sometimes brings him into question a little bit. He did have the only touchdown of the session this weekend. But you've also got Mark and Michelle, who we didn't mention, who came back last year and is now kind of back. And we see that with a lot of guys when they come back from the NFL. It takes them a while to get the CFL game back into their bones. So you'll have Mark and Michelle back. So I do think that the Stampeders receiving core is better than it was at the end of last season, and that's addition through guys of injury. However, guys like Epps, Isaiah Epps caught a couple of nice balls on the weekend. And so I think there are going to be some guys that are around in the periphery. It took Kamar Jordan 5 years to crack this team as a receiver because they just kept bringing in the new guy. So I'm really looking forward to what these guys are able to offer in the preseason action. I know Nick Lewis, in talking to him, he's super excited about what some of these rookies are able to show. And thinks that they might be able to steal a spot on this team. And if they do, then good news for Calgary, because they've got talented receivers. But if they're getting better receivers and guys aren't winning those jobs, that just means that the next guy up is going to be even more talented.
We talk about the Calgary quarterback factory, but I think there's a Calgary running back factory going on there. Kadeem Carey's off to Toronto, so they continue to develop that Argonauts franchise, as I'm sure you appreciate, Ryan. But a full season of Dedrick Mills and Peyton Logan, if he's healthy and they're going to get him involved in the offense, I'm excited for that.
Dedrick Mills, I don't know. Are you guys fans of the show The Boys?
I've certainly heard of it.
On Prime?
I've watched the first season. Yeah, that's it so far.
So there's a sequence in the first episode for people who haven't watched it, and I encourage if you have access to Prime, watch the first episode because you'll see what I'm talking about. The universe's equivalent of the Flash, the guy who can run incredibly fast, is running incredibly fast, and he runs through someone and turns them into a mist. That's Dedrick Mills. Dedrick Mills, when he hits you, you turn into mist. He is the most like you talk about running backs a lot, and you're like, oh, he's contact adverse. No, Dedrick Mills wants to hit you. He wants to run through you. He initiates contact so that he can continue to run over you. And then you've got on the flip side, Peyton Logan, who's a blink and you'll miss him running back, where if you give him a phone booth worth of room, he's going to find the end zone. And so between the two of them, again, if this Calgary offensive line can block like they're capable of, all of a sudden you're going to find that the Calgary offense is right back to where you want it to be, which is 5 or 6 yards on first down from a running back, and then some sort of passing play on the second shot. That's what they were showing in this red and white game on the weekend, was a lot of run first downs, and they're just going to see whether or not they can get that production in 5 or 6 yards.
I do want to ask about the DB group. I think it's another area of the team where they've had about 40 different combinations in the backfield over the past 2 years because of injuries. Jonathan Moxey gets released, but they hang on to Titus Wall, who is only going to get better. He's 25 years old. The Stamps overall are a quite young team. Who else are we looking for in that defensive backfield?
There's 21 of them still. So your guess is as good as mine, Travis. There's 21 DBs on this roster right now, ahead of this this next round of cuts. And I think that they are trying everybody. Malcolm Thompson made a great interception on the weekend in the back of the end zone. Brandon Dozier is showing that he's not going anywhere. He might be patrolling at safety this year, and he made a brilliant diving punch out of a catch on a receiver on the weekend. So I think there will be some familiar names there. I'm not sure that Trey Roberson is going to lose his job. I expect Brandon Dozier to still be there, Titus Wall at that nickel spot. As far as the rest of the spots, I mean, that's 18 guys for another 3 spots. So I think there could be a lot of opportunity there for a lot of different players. And including the first round draft pick, there was an off the board defensive back that they really liked because of his speed. I really liked when he got on the draft show and they said, "What do you do?" And he goes, "I run fast and I tackle." I thought,
hey, that's what we need.
Good.
I'm here to hit dingers.
That's what I need. That's what I need. And let's not forget Demario Houston either. They signed Demario Houston in the offseason as well. So I think Calgary really suffered from injuries last season, and it really led to an underperformance. They lost 8 one-score games last year. And, I mean, even if you flip half of those, they're above 500. If you coin flip half of them into one guy might have made a difference one way or another in a one-score game. I really think that Calgary is better than they looked last year. And again, if they can get production from the tackle spot, to me, far and away, that was the problem last year. They weren't getting production at tackle. If they can get production at tackle this year, it will make an astonishing difference to how the Stampeders look.
I almost don't want to ask, because the additions and the departures thing with the Stampeders, every single year, the Stampeders aren't very involved in free agency or anything like that. So, I mean, they bring in Matt Schiltz, Demario Houston, we talked about, a couple offensive line veterans, Trevon Tate and Kyle Saxlett, and linebacker Micah Tights. That about covers it. So a lot of it is just in that Stampeders factory of recruiting and PR and things like that. But fans of Two and Out will say that our Sheldon Jones is the number one hater of the Calgary Stampeders. So Ryan, your job right now is to convince people like Sheldon Jones why the Calgary Stampeders are going to be back in the playoffs for a 19th straight season.
Well, I've watched Sheldon as I talk, and I can see him getting angrier and angrier. And I feel like the pre-show offer of a free Blizzard is slowly dipping away. But I think.
Oh, you're good. You're such a good salesman that I'm actually like, man, I'm gonna have to.
He's Stampeders first place.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Here's the thing about the Stampeders. I get why people hate them. They've been good 2 generations. Not like, oh, they've been good for a couple of seasons. They've been good since 1990, with the exception of 3 box factory years where somebody bought the team so his son could play quarterback. If you take those 3 years out of the mix, Calgary's been good for 34 years.
They're the Patriots.
Of course you're going to be mad. Of course you're going to hate them. They've been the team that beat your team your entire life. And how of course you hate them. Why wouldn't you hate them? Of course you do. But here's the thing. There's a reason why they're this good. And the reason is because the guys in the front office have been there for a long time. They don't shuffle out guys when they have, you're seeing teams fire guys with 500 records. Why? What about that says that wasn't enough for you? What about that? Like, I get it if the guy goes 3-15 for a couple of years and that's terrible and you got to get rid of it. That makes sense to me. But if you don't have that kind of continuity, I mean, it even works in the NFL. You look at Bill Belichick was with New England forever. They weren't always good. They weren't always in the playoffs, but they continued to go back to the well, and they were good for a generation. You need to give people time to build a culture. You need to give them time to have that in there. You need players to know that these guys aren't going anywhere. You hear all the time about players quitting on their coaches and coaches getting fired because it's easier to replace one coach than it is to replace 46 football players. Well, when everybody knows the coach isn't going anywhere because, in this case, he's also the general manager, so you're going if you're not fitting into the system, that does cause people to really kind of knuckle down and, okay, I need to make this work here because the guy at the top's not going anywhere. I mean, hell, just looking around, you've got how many? Chris Jones has coached 3 teams in the time that Dave Dickinson's been here, and that's just one guy. You look at you look at every team has shuffled their front office in the time that Calgary's done it, and it just doesn't make sense to me because you're not able to build that culture and you're not able to build on your successes. Not every year is going to end in a Grey Cup championship. I mean, I know I don't have to tell you all that, but oh, I couldn't help myself. But I think when you look at what Calgary's done, there's the reason they're the envy of the league, and that's people want to be Calgary. They model themselves on Calgary. Winnipeg's done it with Mike O'Shea having been there now for a good long time, building that culture, building that room, and knowing that Mike O'Shea's not going anywhere unless he wants to, and that feeling of permanence really helps structure and anchor an organization, and it breeds success.
I wonder now that Dave Dickinson is a Canadian citizen, if he is a part of the Canadian mafia. The best thing to ever come out of the whole mic'd up saga with the CFL. Finally, I just want to ask you, and I'm going to put a long timeline on this. There have been rumors about Calgary ownership. I think they're just rumors. I'm not sure. Edmonton looks like they're gearing for a change before the end of the season. Will the Stampeders have a new place to play in the next, I'm going to say, 15 years? I'm putting a really long timeline on this.
They have
15 years?
Well, because I didn't want to say 5, because I think the answer is no there. But
no, it's not 5. That's for
any
sure.
rumblings on that front, ownership or stadium?
No, and that's because the city of Calgary just bought them a hockey rink.
Yeah.
So I think as long as the Flames own the Stampeders, I don't see a new stadium being built for the Stampeders. I'd love for it to happen. I honestly would. But at the same time, man, you can bitch about McMahon's bathrooms and concession lines and stuff like that. But there's not a bad seat in that house, and there's not. I've been to other cities, and yeah, the stadium in Winnipeg is great. It's really nice, but the concourses are still crammed. Like the concourses are still crammed. It's impossible to get around, and they've got the brand new stadium. That feature is not any better there than it is here. Despite, you can get better options there from a food perspective than you can get here.
Hold on.
Hold
on. Like, where else can I buy a giant barbecue turkey leg, and then right next I can get a foot-long hot dog, and then the other, like, I've toured McMahon Stadium food options, and then the $10 baked potato that's about a pound of potato, and then another pound of toppings. I'm sorry, Calgary food, they know what they're doing, man.
Calgary food's gotten way better. It's just getting to it.
Oh yeah, okay. There's no Walby burger, but
the way the lines are, the way the structure is.
I get it.
The concourse isn't built for that many people. But at the end, people who complain about McMahon, you're really grasping at the straw because the team is good. You know who doesn't complain about their stadium? The Red Blacks, because they complain about their team. Like it doesn't matter. I
like that.
You can talk all you want about how man is in comparison to other stadiums because it is the worst stadium in the league. Fine. It's still better than most? The team on the field. And as it turns out, I'm not a fan of the bathrooms of McMahon Stadium. I'm a fan of the Calgary Stampeders, and it matters what's on the field, and it matters what you can see on the field. You're not at I've been to everywhere but Tim Hortons Field. I'm hoping to get to the Donut Box eventually, but that's the only field I haven't been to. All of them are the same. At BMO, great place to watch a game. But after the game, you can't actually walk around the stadium because they block half of it off so that the Argos can walk to their dressing rooms and fight fans on the way. Like, that's a problem. That's a problem, right? I've been to New Mosaic. Again, great stadium, really nice. Better for the players than most other stadiums around. But it's not any better in the stands. You know, like, what am I missing? A cup holder? You know, like, okay, I could use a cup holder and a molded seat. Sure, I guess. You know, but like, really, I mean, Jesus, the standards that people have become accustomed to now are ridiculous. And the idea that you want to, like, oh, I have to sit on a metal bench. Yes, you have to sit on a metal bench like generations of fans before you. Just get over it.
As a fat person, I would love them to bring back the benches. Believe.
Yeah.
More benches, please.
I could use, I use the dual seat with the removable armrest.
Yes.
Yeah. Make the armrest, make it at least so it moves up so that I can spill into my other seat. But I mean, like, I sit up high at McMahon. I sit either in the press box or when my family's there, I sit high on the middle benches. You know, I bought a stadium seat off of Amazon for $30 and I'm perfectly comfortable. You know, like, just, it's not that tough. It's not that tough to enjoy a game, and I think you're just coddled. These Gen Alpha kids with their inability to sit still. Yerg with me and my gray beard. You know, I can't like it's just, you know. Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, I want an indoor stadium. I'm not going to lie. I don't like going to -40 football games. That's ridiculous. I don't think football should be played outside at that temperature. I think football should be played inside. I think the Stampeders have always been a good enough team that playing outside probably cost them several Grey Cups over the years because they would end up having these track meet teams that were fantastic in July and August, and then they'd have to host a West playoff game, and it would be on the frozen tundra of McMahon Stadium, and all of a sudden they couldn't compete. You know, play those games inside, and Calgary's probably got way more Grey Cups than they have. But that's a discussion for another day.
This is Ryan Ballantine flexing his podcast muscles. It's good to hear you again, man. A contributor for 3downnation.com and the Go Stamps Go show. So thanks for doing this, and we're looking forward to seeing the red and white on the field again, proving that Sheldon Jones wrong.
Yes. If one Sheldon Jones can be wrong, let it be this one.
Often am. I often am.
Thanks for doing this, man.
Pleasure as always.
Make sure you subscribe to see more CFL content all season long, including all of our team previews heading into the 2024 season.